I guess I need to introduce myself since there are some new people as well. My name's Tori Hughes. I'm the manager of the Career Services Department at Harry Norman. We provide training to our agents, and we always try to come up with new classes and tools that will help you with your business. And when I started in this role, I took advantage of the opportunity to create things that I kind of always wished that I had had when I was an agent. And one thing was a transaction checklist. I was like, that is the first thing I'm putting out to the agents because I always wished that I had one. So I took the opportunity to create these. They're also in app files. So you can add it to your app file and check these items off as you go throughout the transaction. Basically what I did when I created these was I took my transaction checklist that I created and had Drew, our technology trainer, put it in PDF format. So let me share my screen really quick. This is the buyer transaction checklist. It starts from the second you get this new lead, because that's really when the process starts. And you want to make sure that you are doing all of these things to, stay in flow, stay in contact. So with new lead activities, I start off with adding them to your phone, adding them to your CRM, right? Because if you don't have a process for doing things, sometimes you may forget to add them to your CRM or to send a personal note, etc. So this goes from new lead activities to pre-search activities to search activities. And then we get to contract to close, all the way down to post-closing activities. And in the class today, we're going to start with the contract to close portion. We're not going to go through the pre-search activities or anything like that, but I just want you to know that those are on the checklist. All right, so now I'm going to go to the PowerPoint. And again, like I said, if you have any questions, just please take yourself off of mute. Right, so the goals for today, we want to be able to confidently navigate the contract to close process. We want to understand the importance of each step in the process. And I would love for you to leave with a roadmap or a process to get to the closing table, because that at the end of the day, that is our main goal, right? We want to get to the closing table. That's how we get paid. And that's how your clients are going to get their new home or sell a home. All right, so to start off with, maybe to wake everybody up, I'm going to start off with a video from the Modern Family Realtor, Ty Burrell. He is going to do a funny little clip if it works. Here it goes. Hopefully. I always get nervous with my videos.
A slow home buyer is a no home buyer. Navigating the real estate world requires cat-like reflexes. No, that's too early. Requires cat-like reflexes. Now, cat-like. This isn't that hard, guys. When I say reflexes, what if I throw the ball back and you reverse it on film? Sexile fear Kyle tack. Run that backwards. It's cat-like reflex.
All right, so that was a silly little video, which, it's always good to start with some humor. And navigating the real estate market does involve cat-like reflexes, but what I want you to remember, more importantly, it involves a process. That way we can make sure we get every step of the process done to get your clients to the closing table. So before we start with our steps, I think it's important to revisit the services that buyers want. That's how we can tailor their experience and make sure we're giving them everything that they're looking for. So this is from Real Trends at Harris Interactive. But the top 6 services that buyers want: number 1, they want access to current and active sold data, a buyer packet with information about the buyer process, including contracts, a process to find the right house at the right price without missing anything. That's what we're going to cover today, is that process. Number 4, a proactive, competent realtor they can trust to look out for their needs and help them navigate the process. Number 5, a smooth transaction that closes on time with no or few surprises. Well, that would be wonderful, right? If there were no or few surprises. But it's a proven fact that if you have a process that you continually follow consistently, that you can help mitigate those surprises or those fire drills that may come up because it's the last minute and something hasn't been done. So if you follow this process, it definitely will help with those few or no surprises. Number 6, consistent communication from their realtor. And I've built in communication points into this transaction checklist that will definitely help you keep that consistent communication with your client. And I do believe that once you go under contract, some agents kind of stop the communication with their clients, right? They may not talk to them as often, right? Because when you're looking for homes, you may call your client every day, or you're having a constant text chain. I remember when I was selling, sometimes my clients would be like, I've not heard from you in a day. Is something wrong? And that's because you want to make sure you're keeping that consistent communication going with them. All right. So before working with buyers and sellers, number 1, we want to examine our mindset. Our goal is to always add value with every interaction with our clients or anyone really in our sphere of influence. We want to look at it as a customer experience versus the customer service. So an experience, that's something that lasts. That's something that people remember, that they rave to their friends about. That's how you're really going to get those referrals from your clients. And also remember that luxury is a level of service and not a price point. Here at Harry Norman, we believe that everybody deserves an exceptional real estate experience. And that really is luxury, right? Regardless of the price point, the number of transactions that someone has had with you or in their lifetime, everyone deserves that luxurious, exceptional real estate experience. And one way to ensure you're doing that for every one of your clients is to have a checklist, is to have a process. That's why I feel that using this checklist is really important and will benefit your business. Number 2, preparation. We want to cover skills. That's knowing your contracts, knowing your technology. Market knowledge, it's knowing what's going on in the market, staying up to date, whether it's attending webinars or podcasts, listening to market experts, reading things, just knowing what's going on in your market. Negotiation skills, those are things that you learn with time, but there's also skill set trainings that we provide for that. And then last would be your process. Want to make sure you always are following a process when working with buyers and sellers. Right, so on the buyer side, like I said, there's 5 different categories on that checklist or the transaction checklist. One would be the new lead activities, the pre-search activities, search activities, that's when you're actually going out and looking at the homes, contract to close activities, and post-closing activities, which we're going to cover today. And then with sellers, those steps are pretty similar. We have the new lead activities, the pre-listing activities, listing and marketing activities when you're marketing the home, and then the contract to close and the post-closing, which we're going to cover today. All right, so like I said at the beginning, we have a binding contract. You're representing a buyer and your contract has finally been accepted. You beat out, 10 other offers in some cases. Now, what do you do as the realtor? So we're going to cover buyers first, and then we'll come back and start with sellers. So this is going to cover all those steps on the checklist that start with the contract to close activities, working with buyers. So you are under contract, you have you have the binded contract. What is the next thing we're going to do? Well, you are going to turn the binding contract into your office via app files. Every office I've noticed has a different preference on how this is done. So I would suggest you check with your transaction coordinator in your office or your broker to see, and they may have already told you when you onboarded, but to find out exactly how they want you to turn in that binding contract. Some offices like you to create an update. Some offices like you to put it in that stage in app files. So just check with your office, but you do want to make sure that you turn the binding contract into your office. Next, you're going to complete the DPN in app files, which looks like this. So the DPN, this is how you're going to get paid. That's kind of like how I like to teach the agents. And that's how I can ensure that you're actually going to do it, because everyone wants to get paid, right? So this is how the paperwork gets processed into our DPN system. So you'll create a DPN file for every transaction you have. This is where you're going to put in information about your buyer or your seller, contract information as far as sales price, binding date, due diligence date. If this is a transaction that you're working with another agent and you're getting 50%, they're getting 50%, say you're doing it with your mentor or with a teammate, you'll fill that out in here. If this is a Harry Norman corporate relo, you'll put that in here also. So your office staff will make sure you get this done. One important reason why you want to make sure this is filled out correctly is when we send out the QSC reviews to your clients, that information is coming from here. So you want to make sure you put their full address and their email address. That's how they're going to get sent those QSC reviews, is from the information that's in the DPN. Next up, you're going to want to send the binding contract and next steps and important dates email to your buyer. So there is a form in app files, a GAR form, that has important dates. I can't think of the name of the form off the top of my head. You could use that. I always sent it as an email and I just kind of bullet pointed out these dates. They are very important for them to know when the due diligence ends, when their earnest money is due, how to deposit the earnest money, etc. And that's why it's good to put this in an email, make sure everyone is on the same page. Let me check the chat. Reminder of important dates and timelines. Thank you, Sherry. I haven't had enough coffee yet either. So that is the title of the form and app file, reminder of important dates and timelines. So you could certainly use that form. Some agents like to send the form to their co-op agent as well to make sure that they are on the same page also. Next up, you'll want to send the binding contract to the closing attorney and the lender as soon as possible so they can start working on the file. The lender needs to get that contract the second you go binding, so they can, especially when you're working on these tight deadlines that we are writing into contracts right now with short financing and appraisal contingency periods. Make sure you're having that conversation with the lender, however, before you write the contract, so you know how long it's going to take them to do an appraisal or to do the underwriting if you are putting those contingencies in the contract. But the lender is going to want that as soon as possible, and so is the closing attorney. Even if you think you may terminate because of an inspection issue or something like that, go ahead and get these over to them so they can start working on the file. They're backed up and busy just like we are. And then add the important dates to your calendar. So things such as due diligence ending, financing and appraisal contingency, earnest money, all those important dates. I would say make it a habit to add these to your calendar with reminders. This is going to also remind you to contact your client about the important dates, which is going to further enhance the customer experience. So even if they've already, you've already been talking about financing and appraisal, and the financing contingency period is up, and you know that they're already fully underwritten, send them a quick email and just say, just as a reminder, financing contingency ends tomorrow. We are all good. We have received final approval. However, just wanted to let you know this is on your radar. Just shows that you are a professional and that you are giving that exceptional customer experience. Right, next up is you're going to want to confirm that the buyer has deposited or turned in their earnest money. We highly suggest that your clients use our online earnest money deposit portal. That's on harrynorman.com under services. It's super quick and easy. Your buyer doesn't have to go to the bank. They don't have to call anybody. They can just do a one-stop that way. Your office staff is going to notify you via app files once the earnest money has been processed. So therefore you can let the listing agent know that it's been deposited. Next up, you'll want to assist the buyer in scheduling inspections, survey, and any other vendors. You don't want to be the one that's actually calling and scheduling these things, but you can definitely give them suggestions, preferred vendor list that you may use. Always make sure you give them more than one. And there is, again, a form in app files that you can use to suggest vendors. You could do a preferred vendor list that you could go ahead and put in your buyer presentation or binder that you give to your buyers, when you have that initial buyer meeting. That way they have that from day one. You can put things on there such as HVAC repair, not just inspectors and surveyors. And if you're newer to the business and you do not have a preferred vendor list, most of our offices have them. So those are also on the cloud under career services and vendor lists. So you can check there if you need a resource. And again, talk to your office, your broker, your office staff. They'll definitely be able to help you locate that file. And a good way to find out about good vendors also is just to talk to your fellow agents, right? You got a little text group going on, you can always ask them to refer somebody to you. After you have the inspection and your due diligence period, while you're in your due diligence period, you'll want to negotiate and create the amendment to address concerns and app files. You'll want to negotiate this with the sellers to find out what they're going to cover if you are going to negotiate any items. And then once you do that, you'll want to create an update to alert your office transaction coordinator. And with that amendment and any amendments that happen once you go binding, you'll want to send those to the closing attorney and the lender so they can use those in their file, especially if it's something that involves money that's going to change the cash needed to close or any terms of the loan. You want to make sure the lender and the closing attorney both get those so the settlement statement and the CD are correct. You don't want to delay closing because once the CD comes and you had forgotten to send that you negotiated a $5,000 closing cost credit, and then they've got to resend it through underwriting. You want to make sure that you get that out ASAP to the closing attorney and the lender. Right. So I already said that, send all amendments to the closing attorney and lender as soon as possible. You'll next want to complete the instructions to closing attorney in app files and send it to the closing attorney. So if you are a newer agent, the instructions to closing attorney, this is how you get paid from the closing. So I know I said the DPN is how you're going to get paid from Harry Norman, but the instructions to closing attorney is how Harry Norman's going to get paid from the closing. So we can pay you. So this is where you're going to put the percentage of commission. And if there is going to be a 225 flat portion of commission collected from the buyer, that's going to go on there also. I always say it's best practice, especially when you're representing the buyer, because we charge that 225 flat portion, for you to initiate the instructions to closing attorney versus having the seller's agent initiate that, because in app files, we have the 225 pre-printed on our instructions to closing attorney, and that'll help you not forget to include that. Then you want to schedule the pre-closing walkthrough. This you want to do as close to closing as possible. If your buyers think that they don't need a pre-closing walkthrough, you can assure them that they do. I'm sure you have heard some, dramatic stories from pre-closing walkthroughs, but those things really do happen. And if you don't do it and you get to closing, there's no recourse. So for example, I was representing a seller one time, and the buyers came and did their pre-closing walkthrough the morning of closing, and there was a leak in the basement. There had been a huge storm. It was a vacant house. There'd been a huge rainstorm for a couple of days, and the basement had some standing water. We were able to delay closing and get that remedied. However, had the buyers not done a pre-closing walkthrough, and if they had not seen that standing water, then they wouldn't have had any recourse against the sellers to cover that. And because they did that pre-closing walkthrough, they were able to delay closing to get the sellers to cover it. So just a little, story. Sometimes if those are in your mind, you'll be able to remember these things better. And just, again, using the transaction checklist is just going to give you triggers and reminders to do these things. Next, you'll want to send the buyer a pre-closing email with the wire fraud warning, directions to closing, and the date and the time. On the cloud, there is a buyer pre-closing letter template that you can copy and paste into your email. Ashu Sharma, our in-house legal counsel, wrote that. So that it has been, proofread, and that the wire fraud warning, et cetera, everything is good to go on there. You're not the one that's making up that verbiage. This is a really important topic to discuss with your buyers and your sellers, but especially the buyers. Not just when you send this pre-closing email. You really should start having this conversation at your very first meeting to let them know that they are never going to receive a request to send money from anybody but the closing attorney. If they get an email from you with wire instructions, that is fraud. If they get one from Harry Norman or the lender, all that is fraud. And once they start applying for loans and their information's out there, that's when the fraudsters, start attacking. So just let them know that they will get their wire instructions from the closing attorney. It's going to be in a secure file, and they may even want to call and confirm those instructions with the closing attorney once they receive them. And all of that is written in the wire fraud warning template on the cloud. And then order your closing gift if that's something that you were going to do for your clients. If you wait till the last minute, you'll be scrambling, heading to closing, stopping at the store, then inevitably something's going to come up. You'll have to go show a house. So if you make this part of your process at the beginning, you won't have to scramble. When I was selling, I kept a lot of closing gifts on hand, so I wouldn't have to scramble. I could just kind of, do it from my home, bulk buy things. We want to confirm clear title with the closing attorney. So what does this mean? Clear title states that the owner of real property owns it free and clear of encumbrances. 9 times out of 10, the closing attorney is going to let you know early on if they have an issue with title. But just another step in the process that you can show your expertise to your clients and let them know, yes, I checked, title is clear, we're good to go. You'll next want to confirm that the closing disclosure has been received and acknowledged by the buyer. This shows that actual interest rate, the actual monthly payments, closing costs, and cash required to close. You'll remember that this is due 3 business days prior to closing, or the closing will be delayed. So this must be acknowledged by the buyer. within those 3 business days prior to closing, or they will delay closing. This is not anything you can get around. This is a federal law. So a pro tip is to add this to your calendar. Prosperity is very good. I've not heard of any Prosperity lender that we work with missing the CDE date. But if you're working with a lender that's not Prosperity, I will tell you, you need to be checking up on this timeline, especially when they are as busy as they are. Or if it's a very, big online Rocket Mortgage, Quicken type lender, where you're talking to several different people every time you call. Just add this to your calendar so you can follow up and be on top of it. This is a little chart that Prosperity has. This is the 3-day closing disclosure. So you can kind of count back. If your closing's on a Monday, you need to receive the disclosures, your buyer does, and they need to acknowledge them by that previous Thursday in order to close on time. So this chart is also on the cloud if you want to reference it. Some people take a picture of it and save it to their phone or print it out and put it on their bulletin board. That way they always have it readily available. All right, next up is you'll want to confirm that the buyer has sent the wire to the closing attorney for their down payment and their cash to close. So once they receive that CD and they have their cash to close number on it, and the closing attorney sends them the wire instructions, they're free to wire it. And, if it's a big sum of money, they may want to make sure that they do it in plenty enough time, because I think there are rules. If it goes over $100,000, it goes through another clearinghouse. So just make sure they check with their bank to make sure that they're sending it in time. So then you'll attend the pre-closing walkthrough. You'll want to confirm that any repairs that were negotiated have been made, confirm the property is vacant, confirm all checked fixtures remain. So a best practice or a pro tip would be to bring the seller's property disclosure statement with you to the pre-closing walkthrough, and also print out that amendment to address concerns with property. So you can go through, and if the chandelier in the dining room was supposed to remain with the property, and that was a really important feature of the home for the buyer, you'll want to make sure that's there. Or if the washer and dryer was supposed to stay, make sure that is still there. Or if there's any cleaning that was supposed to be done or repairs, again, make sure that you guys have checked that those have all been done at this point. Check the waters on, the gas, etc. I always would go through and flush the toilets and, turn on all the eyes on the stove, make sure they're working. Then you'll want to attend closing if possible. I think most closing attorneys are back to letting the agents attend closings. That's generally the fun day, right? Everyone's happy. They're either getting their house or getting their money. And even if it's been a tumultuous, stressful closing, most of the time everyone comes together and they're happy at the end. And you don't really do much at closing as an agent. You may have to witness a couple of documents, but you're more there for moral support and to celebrate with your client. If they are a first-time home buyer, they may have questions. They may need more hand-holding, want you right beside them, or it could be their 10th transaction and they need some hand-holding. So at this point in the transaction, your client, you're going to know how much they want you to be involved at the closing. If you cannot attend, see if you can send a colleague or your broker in your place, especially if it's a client that needs someone there with them. Just let them know how the closing is going to go, that, they'll be in the room with the seller. Sometimes in different states, they do closings differently. One of my very first clients that I had, they were from Texas, and it wasn't their first time purchasing a home. So I didn't really go through the closing day with them that much beforehand. And we got to closing and the seller was there, and they just were not expecting that, because in Texas, the buyer and the seller really never see each other. So, it would have been good if I had given them a little bit of a warning. It was fine. It hadn't been a tumultuous experience, but the seller was very emotional. It was the home where she had raised her family in, her kids, her grandkids, and she cried through the entire closing. And, my buyers were great. Everyone was, fine with the situation. But I think had they been a little mentally prepared for it, it would have been a value add. So talk through their experiences previously at closings and how that went, and just ask those consultative questions throughout the process so you know how you can add value. All right. So you don't want to end then, right? You don't want to end at the closing table, see you later, never hear from you again, because you want this to be a relationship that goes on. So you can get referrals, you can continue to be their trusted advisor for their most important asset. So you want to make sure that you also do the post-closing activities. So the first step after you leave closing is you'll want to upload the final settlement statement to app files and notify your office. Campbell and Brannon sends this electronically. If you're closing somewhere else, you may have to scan it in, but we do need the final settlement statement in app files for your records. Then if the commission check was not wired, you'll want to turn it into your office listing or your office transaction coordinator. Campbell and Brannon wires all of our commissions to Harry Norman. So you won't have to do that if you're closing with Campbell and Brannon, but I know that sometimes we don't always get to close with them. So if you get a check, you'll want to turn it into your office as soon as possible. Then you can post sold or closed on social media. Even though you're representing the buyer, you can post a picture of the home. Just make sure you give credit to the listing agent. Congratulations to my buyers, Jack and Jill. They closed on this beautiful home in Brookhaven today at 123 Main Street, listed by Tori Hughes of Harry Norman Realtors. You want to make sure that you're giving credit to the listing agent, and so that the consumer can find where the home is. You'll want to send a thank you card in the mail. You've probably already given them their closing gift. I always liked to send a thank you card about a week later. And I would also include a little insert from I think you all have them in your offices, but it's the Community Fund for Greater Atlanta, how we are able to donate a portion of every closing to that. I had mine set up to draw out of every closing. And so when I sent my thank you card in the mail to my clients, I would insert that little card about the Greater Community Fund. And I would tell them thank you for their business, and also for allowing me to be able to contribute and give back to our community, and let them know that they were a part of that as well. Just a nice little touch point. Can send an email requesting reviews. Like I said, we are going to send one out for the QSC review on your behalf. Those go out, there's a timeline. It's usually within the month of closing. That goes out automatically. But if you want your clients to leave you a review on Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, or Zillow, any of those other platforms, you can send an email asking them to leave you a review. I felt like my sphere was, they were on Facebook, they were on Google, they were on LinkedIn. So I created a little card that I sent through the CRM asking them to leave me a review. And, people, if you ask, they will do it. Just tell them this is how you get a lot of your business. You would really enjoyed working with them. And if they could please leave you a review, that would be amazing. Send a thank you card to the referral source. So if this was a referral from a previous client or a friend or a neighbor, a family member, send them a thank you card. Let them know that you appreciate their referral. Another thing is keep them in the loop throughout the entire transaction. You don't have to give them every little detail, right? But if they've sent you a great referral, a great client, let them know, I got Bob and Sally under contract. We're heading to the closing table. It's been, a great experience getting to know them. Thank you so much for sending them over. Keep them in the loop, because people refer somebody to their friends and family because it makes them look good. So they want to know how you're doing. And if you're doing well and you're helping them out and you're providing this level of service, they're going to continue to send you referrals, right? And you want to love on your referral sources because you want more. Change the buyer's mailing address in your CRM. They've moved. You've got them saved in your CRM at, one address. And now when it comes to send out your quarterly mailers and you print out your mailing labels, you've got to have their new address so you can stay in flow with them. So make sure you change that in the CRM. You can also add a home anniversary date in your CRM. That way next year on their home anniversary and every year after that, you can send them a card, a text, a phone call. I know agents do cute things like sending a dozen donuts on their year anniversary, one donut or cookie or something like that for every month in the home. One thing that I always did was I went ahead and I would schedule their 1-year home anniversary email to be sent out in the CRM. I would do that, a week after they closed, a couple of days after they closed. So when we get to that 1-year home anniversary next year, it's already set up. I don't have to think about it. I would copy myself on the email. And once I got it, it would trigger me in my mind to call them, text them, etc. So just a little pro tip to make your life easier. All right, before we get into the sellers, any questions on the buyer process from contract to close? You guys are very quiet today. Nobody? Well, I must have been explaining it perfectly then, if there's no questions. All right, so the sellers, we're going to start from going under contract, just like we did with the buyers. So the sellers, they've already received their 50 offers on the house. You've helped them go through these offers. You've used the multiple offer spreadsheet for comparison, and they have selected a buyer and they are ready to close. All right. So just like when working with a buyer, the very first step of the process is to turn the binding contract into the office via app files. So same thing that I said with the buyers, check with your office staff to see how they want that turned in. If they want it as an update, if they want you to move it to a different stage, ask them what they prefer. You'll also, for sellers, you'll complete the DPN and app files just like you did for buyers. And you'll also want to update your transaction coordinator when you've done that as well. Because if you don't do it, they're going to keep asking you for it. So make sure you make that a step of the process at the beginning. Next, you're going to want to send the binding contract and next steps and important dates email to the seller. They're going to be interested in these deadlines too, especially that due diligence deadline and the appraisal contingency deadline, and the earnest money. Honestly, they're going to want to know about all of these. So again, this helps to make sure everyone's on the same page. Everyone has the dates correct, because the seller doesn't know how to count the days quite like we do, right? So let's make sure we're all on the same page with those. And then add those important dates to your calendar, just like we did with buyers. This is going to help you stay organized, help you stay on top of things, and just really make you look like that professional that's reminding your client of these deadlines that they've come up, that they've passed, etc. Because this enhances the customer experience. Especially when you're working with a seller, sometimes there's not as much communication after you go binding, because that's when the buyer is working on everything. The buyer's working on their finance, working on their due diligence, etc. So if you can keep in contact with them by letting them know, okay, receive the earnest money, it's due tomorrow, so we're good. You can stay in flow with them during those steps. That is going to enhance the experience. Then you'll negotiate and upload the amendment to address concerns in app files, just like you did when you were working with the buyers. You're not going to be the one to initiate this, obviously, if you're working with the seller, but you'll definitely want that in your app file. Then any amendments you're going to want to send to the closing attorney as soon as possible. Hopefully the buyer's agent has also sent those, but you don't want to assume, and it's always good to send that just in case they have not sent it over themselves. You'll want to complete the instructions to closing attorney in app files and send it to the closing attorney. So after the buyer's agent signs it and you're in agreement, then you'll send that over to the closing attorney. So the appraisal, if there is an appraisal, which, or an appraisal contingency, or if there is an appraisal, sometimes with cash, they don't do an appraisal. So you'll want to create an appraisal packet as the listing agent and meet the appraiser at the property. So some things that you can include in the appraisal packet would be the comparable properties that you use to price the home, a list of upgrades that the seller may have done since they purchased the home, and some prices. I'm sure the sellers are very eager to provide these to you. So it's probably already something that you have, that you've discussed at your pre-listing appointment, and you use those upgrades to price the home. So you should already have these. Story of the transaction. I think this one is really important, especially given this market. If you had 35 offers and they were, 80% were X amount over asking price with zero contingencies, et cetera, provide a summary of this to the appraiser. That'll help them know how high the demand is and help them to see how the sales price became what it was. And then if there's any off-market listings that the appraiser may not know about that you use to price the home, this again just helps tell a story. That's what I like to think of the appraisal packet as. It is a story of the transaction and how the offers came to be. And when you are a listing agent, you're going to receive the call from the appraiser to schedule it. The buyer's agent's not going to receive that call, more than likely. So just, kind of as a tip or a way to stay in good graces with the buyer's agent, if you receive a call that the appraisal is happening tomorrow, a nice thing to do would be send them an email and say, hey, Sally, I got a call from the appraiser. They're able to come tomorrow. I'm meeting them out at the home. Just want to keep you in the loop. That's a good way just to work well with your cooperating agents. You'll want to send the seller a pre-closing email with directions to the closing and the date and the time, et cetera, what all they need to bring with them, forms of ID, et cetera. You'll want to order a closing gift if you're going to be doing so. Schedule the sign removal. So if you have a farmer's sign, like one of our big wooden signs installed, you'll want to schedule that sign to be removed after closing. If you're using a metal sign, you'll want to put yourself a little reminder to go pick it up after closing. Same thing with the lockbox removal. You'll want to make sure you schedule a time to go pick that up as well. I don't love it when agents ask the buyer's agent to bring the sign and the lockbox to closing. Have any of y'all ever been asked to do that? Well, if you're shaking your heads, I can't tell because I can't see your faces. But I always found that so rude when I was selling and people would ask me to bring their lockbox to them. So I think that this is a service industry. We're going to go above and beyond as Harry Norman Realtors, and we're going to go pick that sign and that lockbox up ourselves, right? Unless, of course, say it's halfway across town or something like that, and they offer, that's a different story. But you may not want to make that your process. Maya says she's been asked before too. So that probably rubbed you the same way it rubbed me. I just didn't love it. But I know there's always a time and different circumstances, but don't make it your habit. And then again, attend closing. If you can't, you may want to ask a colleague or your broker to attend for you, just to be there with your sellers. So now we're to those post-closing activities. Again, you're going to want to upload the final settlement statement into app files and notify your office that it's there. Turn the commission check into the office if it was not wired. So again, if you're not closing with Campbell and Brannon or another attorney that wires it, you want to make sure that you turn that check into your office. You can post sold or closed on social media. If this was your listing, you'll have an asset created in MIA automatically once it gets closed that you can post, or you could create something yourself, post a picture from the closing, have your marketing coordinator create something, etc. But this shows that you are doing business, you're in the, you're in the market. So I always think it's a nice little touch to post that onto your social media. Send a thank you card in the mail to your clients. Like I said, I like to do that about a week after closing, and I would include that insert from the Greater Community Fund. Then send an email requesting reviews. So like I said, those QSC reviews, you have to initiate that yourself. Then send a thank you note to the referral source, just like we did with buyers. And we want to keep them in the loop throughout the transaction because we like to love on our referral sources. Those are your #1 fans, those people that refer you. Change the seller's mailing address in the CRM. So even if they're moving out of state, out of country, you don't think that there's a reason to keep in touch with them, there is. They are still going to be friends and keep in touch with people that they know here, right? Say that you have a seller that moved to Texas. Well, they still have friends in the neighborhood, right? So you still want to be keeping in flow with them after they move. And then add a sold anniversary date in the CRM. And you can schedule a 1-year sold anniversary email in the CRM, just something, I would always put a picture of the home. Yeah, congratulations on 1 year since we sold your home. I can't believe that it's been a year, just something cute and quick. And also let them know at the closing table for both buyers and sellers that something that you do for your clients is the market updates. You do those once a year, so you'll be able to keep in touch with them that way. I'd always would just kind of set the stage at the closing table that this isn't the last time you're going to hear from me, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer. In 6 months to a year, I'm going to do a market update. This is something I do for all of my clients. So that way, when you call them to tell them you've prepared it for them, it's not going to be the first time they've ever heard it. All right, and then some tools to help you. We have the transaction checklist that I sent in the email prior to class that we've been going through, the PDF, and there's also Excel files on the cloud if you're an Excel person. And I've also had these added to app files. So if you search under buyer transaction checklist or seller transaction checklist, those are in app files and you can pull them into each individual file and it's editable. So you can check off things when you've done them. There's the how to write a purchase and sale guide. That's in the cloud also. So that's going to take you through the steps of writing the purchase and sale. And then we also have the app files guide on the cloud also. And Drew has app files, tutorials, etc., that can help you get from transaction from the beginning to the end of your transaction. All right, well, I am going to stop sharing to see if we have any questions. Kind of flew through the material, so we have some time if there are any questions. If not, good luck. Happy Valentine's Day. Any questions? All right, well, more time to spend with your sweeties today. Oh, we have a question. what is your recommendation for gifts prices? Well, I think there's a broad range. And if some people, it depends on what market they're selling in. They may base how much they spend based on the price point of the home. I always spent the same amount on everybody. I try to treat all my clients the same, and I gave similar gifts to everybody. I would make these nice like gift baskets and put treats from local vendors and things like that in there. I also had I had some Cutco knives that had my name and phone number on them. So I'd stick those in there because people use a knife every single day and they would see my name and number on it. So I put that in there with some charcuterie and wine and things like that from local vendors where I lived. There's really not a magic number for that. Sherry posted in the chat about the High Museum. Yes, I'm very excited about that too. I think that is an amazing closing gift. So if you've not heard, Harry Norman has partnered with the High Museum in Atlanta, and we have an exclusive discount to High Museum passes. I think for an individual pass, it's about $60 something. And for a family pass, it might be like 80-ish, but they don't only get passes to the High for the year, they get exclusive invitations to other events, discounts to the restaurant and the shops at the High. Great idea, Sherry. She says it's a perfect place to meet them as an activity after they close. Yep, totally agree with that. And it's a good way for, if they're new to Atlanta, new to the area, good activity to introduce them to. So I think that's going to be really nice. And I know the marketing team has created some really nice cards to go along with it that they're going to be rolling out. So stay tuned for that. It's not going to just be an email you're going to send them. We're going to make sure it looks luxe for you. So I love that partnership. Does anyone else have any questions? I encourage you to go back and look at that transaction checklist from start to finish, not just the contract to close part, because I laid out a lot of steps working with your buyers and working with your sellers from the very beginning. So happy selling, happy Valentine's Day. Hope everyone has a great day. I've got one question, hold on. Does the CD come from the realtor to the closing attorney? So the CD is going to come from the lender to the buyer. And they'll sign off on it. If you're working with a lender that you work with frequently, they are going to let you know when it's going to be sent, et cetera. But if your buyer has not received, and your buyer may not even know that they've signed it, they're getting sent things all the time. So you may want to check with the lender just to make sure it's been sent.